The air in the courtroom felt heavy, thick with tension and the faint hum of whispers that died whenever someone turned to look. Every seat was filled journalists, townspeople, and a handful of strangers who had come simply because word had spread that this was the case that had shaken the quiet town of Millstone, Ohio. The courtroom, usually reserved for traffic disputes and small civil hearings, now felt like a stage where something far larger was unfolding. Judge Henry Lawson adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat, though the sound was swallowed by the restless silence that lingered before every verdict. His hands, aged but steady, hovered above the file that contained the fate of Emily Carter, a 28-year-old widow accused of negligence, leading to her husband's death. At the defense table, Emily sat motionless, her blonde hair tied loosely behind her neck, her face pale and drawn. The strain of months spent under public judgment had stolen whatever light once filled her eyes. She looked at the floor rather than at the judge, as if afraid to meet the gaze of justice itself. Beside her sat her attorney, Rachel Kim, a sharp, composed woman who had fought tooth and nail to keep the case alive when everyone else said it was hopeless. In the back row, a little boy swung his legs from the bench. 3-year-old Noah Carter, Emily's son. His grandmother, a frail woman with trembling hands, kept whispering for him to stay quiet, her tone gentle but anxious. He didn't seem to notice the tension. His small fingers clutched a worn stuffed bear, its ear chewed, its fur faded. Outside, the storm clouds gathered, casting gray light through the courthouse windows. It was as if the weather itself waited for the judge to speak. Judge Lawson looked down at the papers again. The evidence was circumstantial, but damning. Emily's husband, David Carter, had been found dead near the riverbank behind their home. The police dog, Rex, had discovered the body, and the investigation, led by Detective Mark Reynolds, had pointed to Emily's emotional instability and unreliable testimony. But there was something about the case that unsettled Lawson. He couldn't put his finger on it. Perhaps it was the quiet strength in Emily's eyes, the way she'd never once raised her voice during the entire trial. Or maybe it was his own growing doubt about Reynolds, whose confidence sometimes bordered on arrogance. He exhaled slowly. "This court," he began, his deep voice echoing through the chamber, "has reviewed the evidence presented, the testimony of all parties, and the findings of the state investigation." The crowd leaned forward. Emily's hands gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles white. Her lawyer placed a steadying hand over hers. And while the circumstances surrounding Mr. Carter's death remained tragic, the evidence, the judge stopped. A sound had interrupted him, a child's voice. Soft, curious, and clear. Noah, who had been playing quietly with his bear, was now standing on the bench. His bright blue eyes were fixed on something at the front of the room. "Grandma," he whispered. The old woman tried to hush him, but he pointed a small finger toward the side of the courtroom, toward Rex the police dog, lying calmly beside his handler, Detective Reynolds. "Bad man," the boy said. His voice wasn't loud, but in the stillness of that courtroom, it rang like a bell. Every head turned. For a moment, no one moved. The judge froze mid-sentence. His eyes flicked toward the child, then to the officer standing beside the dog. Detective Reynolds blinked, visibly startled. He laughed nervously, scratching the back of his neck. "Your Honor, he's just a kid. Doesn't know what he's saying." But the laughter died as quickly as it began. Noah's words had landed, like a stone thrown into still water, rippling through everyone present. "Bad man," Noah repeated, pointing again, his little face serious now. "Dog, no." A murmur spread through the spectators. Someone gasped. Emily turned around, confusion and fear flashing across her face. The judge gripped the edge of his bench, his heartbeat thudding in his ears. He'd seen many outbursts in court before angry witnesses, crying victims, dramatic protests, But never had he seen a 3-year-old bring a room of adults to silence. "Noah," his grandmother whispered urgently, trying to pull him back down. But the boy kept staring, his finger still pointed at the officer. Rex, the dog, suddenly lifted his head. The motion drew everyone's attention. The animal's ears twitched, and he let out a soft whine, a strange sound, uncertain, almost sorrowful. Detective Reynolds tugged at the leash. "Sit," he ordered sharply. The dog obeyed, but his eyes didn't leave the child. The judge's voice finally broke the silence. "Order, order in the court," but no one moved. The atmosphere had changed. The air was heavy with something unseen, like the moment before thunder cracks. "Counsel," Lawson said, turning to both attorneys, "approach the bench." Emily's lawyer looked bewildered, but complied. The prosecutor hesitated, exchanging a glance with Reynolds before walking forward. In hushed tones, Lawson said, "I don't know what that was, but this court cannot ignore it. We'll take a recess." 15 minutes. He banged the gavel once, and the sound echoed through the marble hallways long after everyone began to rise. The courthouse erupted once they stepped outside. Reporters rushed forward, microphones flashing, cameras snapping like lightning. "Judge Lawson, what's happening? Is it true the child identified the officer? Is this a mistrial?" No one answered. The attorneys pushed through the crowd, shielding Emily and Noah as best they could. Inside, Reynolds pulled the dog aside, whispering harshly, "You stupid mutt, what's wrong with you?" Rex only whimpered again, lowering his head. The judge retreated to his chambers, his pulse racing. He poured himself a glass of water, but barely drank it. His hands trembled slightly as he set it down. The boy's words echoed in his mind, "Bad man." Dog no. He'd been a judge for nearly 25 years. He'd seen false witnesses, crooked lawyers, even confessions torn apart under scrutiny. But he'd never seen pure innocence carry such conviction. There was no malice, no manipulation in that child's voice. Just truth or something very close to it. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. It was Rachel Kim. "Your Honor," she said carefully, "I'm requesting that the case be paused until we can clarify what just happened." The judge nodded slowly. "You'll get your pause," he said. "But you'd better be ready to prove that what I just saw wasn't coincidence." She met his eyes firmly. "I intend to." When she left, he sat back in his chair, staring at the wooden ceiling. The faint rumble of thunder rolled in the distance. Outside, rain began to fall, streaking the courthouse windows like tears. In another part of the building, young Noah sat in his grandmother's lap, humming softly, unaware of the storm he had unleashed. He looked up as Rex passed by, the dog's eyes meeting his for a brief moment. Then quietly, the dog gave a small, uneasy whimper just before Detective Reynolds tugged the leash hard and disappeared through the exit door. And somewhere deep, inside Judge Lawson's heart, a quiet dread took root, the feeling that this was only the beginning. The corridors of the Millstone County Courthouse hummed with uneasy murmurs as the rain intensified outside, drumming against the tall windows. What had started as a routine verdict had turned into something electric, something dangerous. The story of the child's outburst had already reached the lobby before Judge Lawson could even leave his chambers. Court clerks whispered in tight clusters. Reporters pressed their ears to doors, hungry for leaks. The entire building seemed to vibrate with the weight of that small voice. "Bad man." "Dog no." Detective Mark Reynolds stalked down the hallway, jaw tight, knuckles white around the leash. Rex trotted obediently beside him, but the dog's eyes kept flicking upward, nervous, uncertain. The officer muttered curses under his breath. He could feel eyes on him from every direction, secretaries, bailiffs, lawyers, all pretending to work while their gazes followed him. "Outburst from a 3-year-old, he grumbled to himself. That's all it is. But his voice betrayed him. It trembled slightly. He turned a corner and nearly collided with Rachel Kim, Emily's defense attorney. Her expression was composed, but her gaze held steel. "Detective Reynolds," she said smoothly, "I hope you'll be available for additional questioning. The judge might want clarification on your report." "I've said everything I needed to say," he replied curtly. "The evidence stands. The wife was negligent. Period." Rachel tilted her head slightly. "And yet the child seems to disagree." Reynolds' lips twitched into a forced smile. "Ma'am, kids make up stories. He's 3. He probably saw a cartoon. Or maybe," she said quietly, "he saw the truth." She walked away before he could respond, her heels echoing sharply against the marble floor. He watched her disappear, jaw clenched, then turned toward the exit. The rain outside hit his face like needles, cold and relentless. In the judge's chambers, Henry Lawson sat at his desk, staring at a legal pad filled with notes he couldn't bring himself to read. The events of the morning replayed endlessly in his head. He'd seen liars crumble and criminals weep, but never had he seen such raw certainty in a child's eyes. He'd ordered the courtroom cleared for the day, citing emotional distress of a minor. But he knew it was only half true. The real reason was simpler. He needed time to think. A knock at his door pulled him back. It was his longtime clerk, Joseph Merrow, carrying a folder. "Judge, the press is outside. They want a statement." "Tell them no comment," Lawson said without hesitation. Joseph nodded, but hesitated before leaving. "Sir, do you think the boy meant what he said?" Lawson didn't answer right away. He removed his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Children don't lie the way adults do, Joseph. They don't know how yet. But if he's mistaken, then it's my duty to find that out," Lawson interrupted. "If he's right, we're standing on the edge of something ugly." Joseph's expression tightened. He'd served beside Lawson long enough to recognize that tone, the one that meant the judge wouldn't rest until the truth was dragged into the light, no matter how deep it was buried. Meanwhile, Emily Carter sat in a small waiting room down the hall, holding Noah tightly against her chest. The boy's soft curls brushed her chin as she whispered to him, "You did nothing wrong, sweetheart. You were just scared, right?" Noah nodded sleepily, thumb in his mouth. He didn't understand the commotion, the flashing lights of cameras beyond the door, the strangers whispering his name. All he knew was that his mother's arms were warm and that she smelled like home. Her lawyer entered quietly, closing the door behind her. "Emily," Rachel said gently, "we're going to ask for a full review. The judge is already considering it." Emily looked up, eyes red from crying. "Do you really think he'll listen?" "Everyone thinks I hurt David. Everyone." Rachel crouched beside her, voice steady. Today changed everything. The judge saw something. So did they. She nodded toward the reporters outside. "They'll tear into this story, and that's exactly what we need. Attention, pressure, the truth." Emily swallowed hard. "But what truth? Noah's just a little boy." "Maybe," Rachel said softly, "but sometimes the smallest witnesses see what grown men hide." By evening, the courthouse steps were swarming. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions into the rain. Did the boy identify the officer? Is there evidence of misconduct? Was the verdict postponed due to corruption? The county sheriff tried to hold them back, but the story had already escaped containment. Local news stations ran the clip within hours, each headline more dramatic than the last. By midnight, national outlets had picked it up. Toddler's 2 words disrupt murder case in small Ohio town. Inside his modest apartment, Judge Lawson sat alone at his dining table, the glow from the television reflecting off his glasses. He muted the news anchor mid-sentence and stared instead at the rain streaking down his window. His wife had passed years ago. The house was too quiet now. He opened Emily Carter's file again. Every page seemed colder, emptier. He reread Detective Reynolds's report. Subject was hysterical. Claimed husband slipped. Dog located body. Evidence suggests neglect. Something in the phrasing gnawed at him. Evidence suggests. But no actual evidence tied her directly. Only inference. Only the word of one officer. He flipped to the photographs. Grainy shots of the riverbank, the muddy slope, the outline of a man half submerged in water. He looked at the time stamp. 10:48 p.m. That night had been raining too. Lawson's mind replayed the way the dog had reacted in court, that soft whine when the child spoke. Dogs didn't fake guilt. Neither did toddlers. He closed the file and reached for the phone. "Joseph," he said when his clerk answered grudgingly, "I want a full review of the evidence logs, including all canine reports. I want the original footage, not the copies." "Sir, it's nearly midnight." "I'm aware." "Get them." When he hung up, he exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of something irreversible pressing down on him. Once he pulled that thread, the whole fabric might unravel. But maybe that was the point. At the same time, across town, Detective Reynolds sat at his kitchen table nursing a glass of whiskey. The rain hammered the roof like an angry drum. His wife had gone to her sister's. She couldn't stand the tension anymore. On the floor beside him, Rex lay restless, tail flicking. Every few minutes the dog would lift his head and whine softly, as if sensing the unease in his master. Reynolds stared into his drink. He could still see the kid's face, that innocent, unblinking stare. The way the boy pointed right at him. He'd been in enough interrogations to recognize fear when he saw it. But what chilled him most wasn't fear. It was certainty. He slammed the glass down, splashing whiskey across the table. "He's a kid," he muttered. "He doesn't know anything." But the words rang hollow. Rex whined again. Reynolds looked down at him. "Don't start," he warned. The dog's ears flattened. He reached for the remote, flipping on the television, just in time to see his own face flash on the news. Detective Mark Reynolds, lead investigator in the Carter case, declined to comment on the child's statement. His stomach twisted. He turned the TV off and sat in darkness. Outside, lightning flashed across the sky, lighting up the framed commendations on his wall, awards for integrity and service beyond duty. Each plaque now felt like an accusation. He poured another drink, but his hand shook too much to bring it to his lips. By morning, the courthouse was surrounded again, not just by reporters, but by protesters. Some held signs reading "Justice for Emily." Others shouted "Support the Blue." Millstone, once a sleepy town, had become a battlefield of opinions. Inside, Judge Lawson arrived early, dark circles under his eyes. Joseph was already there, clutching a folder. "Sir," he said, "you're going to want to see this." Lawson opened the folder. Inside were transcripts of the police radio logs from the night of the incident, and one note stood out. 10:16 p.m. K9 unit reports possible altercation on scene. Camera malfunction due to water exposure. Camera malfunction. Lawson's jaw tightened. "Get me that footage anyway." Joseph nodded. The judge leaned back, eyes narrowing. The whisper of truth was growing louder now, spreading through every hallway, every newspaper, every sleepless conscience in Millstone. It had started with two simple words, but he could feel it now, the storm gathering force. Somewhere in the noise, the truth was waiting. And Judge Henry Lawson intended to find it, even if it tore the courthouse and the town apart. By dawn, the storm had rolled east, leaving Millstone wrapped in a cold gray hush. Puddles mirrored the courthouse columns, and the flag outside hung heavy with rainwater. Inside, Judge Lawson's office smelled faintly of coffee and sleeplessness. He had spent most of the night reading police transcripts, every line raising more questions than answers. The phrase camera malfunction appeared too many times to be coincidence. He rubbed his temples. A whisper from a 3-year-old had shaken the pillars of a system built on procedure. Yet the more he read, the more he felt that Noah Carter's words might be the only pure thing in the entire case. A soft knock. Joseph Merrow entered carrying a new folder. "Your Honor, Dr. Lila Monroe just arrived, the child psychologist you requested." Lawson nodded. "Send her in. And bring the boy." The interview room, the small consultation room, had none of the courtroom's intimidation. There were crayons, wooden blocks, and a worn teddy bear placed deliberately on the table. Dr. Lila Monroe believed truth hid best in simplicity. She was in her 40s, calm-eyed, with a voice soft enough to coax words out of silence. Emily sat nearby, twisting her wedding ring, a nervous habit she hadn't broken, even after the funeral. Noah sat cross-legged on the carpet, humming to himself, unbothered by the adult's tension. Lila crouched down to his level. "Hi, Noah. I'm Lila. Can we draw together?" He nodded, grabbing a crayon. Within minutes, the page filled with blue scribbles, a river, maybe, and 2 stick figures beside a dog. One stick figure was smaller and smiling. The other, taller, had angry lines for eyes. "Who's this?" Lila asked gently, pointing. "That's Daddy. And this?" "The bad man." Emily flinched, tears threatening again. Lila's pencil froze mid-note. "Why is he bad?" Noah frowned, concentrating. "He made the dog mad." "The dog cried." "The dog cried?" Lila repeated softly. He nodded. "He hurt Daddy. Then the dog barked. Then splash." A shiver ran through the room. Lila didn't look at Emily. She simply slid another sheet of paper in front of the boy. "Can you show me where you were?" Noah pointed to a corner of the page, drew a little square. "House." Then a smaller one. "Window." "You saw it through the window?" He nodded again. "Mommy was sleeping. I was watching my stars." Emily covered her mouth. She had no idea her son had been awake that night. A psychologist's report hours later, Lila handed her typed report to Judge Lawson. He read it twice, each line tightening his jaw. Summary. Child demonstrates consistent recall of visual and auditory details associated with traumatic memory. Language pattern indicates genuine recollection, not suggestion. Mentions of dog's distress and officer's presence correspond to K-9 unit on scene. Probability of fabricated memory, minimal. Lawson leaned back. "Minimal," he murmured. "So he really saw something." Lila nodded. "Children this young can't invent layered narratives. His emotions match a witness, not a storyteller." He tapped the desk, deep in thought. If he saw the altercation, that means the husband was alive when Reynolds arrived. "Exactly," she said. "And the dog's behavior in court supports it. Animals remember scent, tone, command." He reacted to the boy's accusation like guilt resurfacing. Lawson looked toward the rain-streaked window. "Then this case is far from closed." Reynolds under scrutiny by midday. Internal Affairs had reopened the file. Detective Reynolds arrived at headquarters, looking like a man walking into his own grave. Cameras trailed him from the parking lot to the entrance. Inside the interview room, Captain Hughes slid a folder across the table. "We're reviewing your K-9 footage, Mark." The judge requested the original drive. Reynolds forced a shrug. "It's corrupted. I filed the report months ago." Hughes' gaze didn't waver. "Then you won't mind us sending it to Quantico's forensics lab?" For a heartbeat, Reynolds said nothing. Then he exhaled. Do what you need to. When he left, Rex waited outside the glass door, tail low, eyes fixed on his handler. For the first time in years, Reynolds avoided looking back. Emily's doubt that night. Emily tucked Noah into bed at her mother's house. The boy drifted off easily, clutching his bear. She lingered beside him, brushing a curl from his forehead. She wanted to believe this new attention would clear her name, but the fear of false hope gnawed at her. What if they twisted her son's words the way they twisted hers? Rachel called just before midnight. The judge's office confirmed the hearing will resume after the new evidence review. Leela's report will be presented. Emily's voice trembled. Do you really think they'll listen to a child? I think they'll listen to what the child saw, Rachel answered. That's different. Fragments of a night across town. Judge Lawson couldn't sleep. He poured coffee, then opened the partially restored body cam footage Joseph had delivered. Static filled the screen at first white noise, raindrops streaking the lens. Then faintly 2 voices. Male 1, Reynolds. Put your hands where I can see them. Male 2, Carter. You're making a mistake, my son's inside. Dog barking splash. Reynolds, stay down. Damn it, Rex, heel. Then silence. The clip ended abruptly. Timestamp, 10:18 p.m. Lawson's pulse quickened. The official report said the body was found at 10:48, 30 minutes missing. He replayed the moment when the dog barked. There was something desperate in it, not aggressive. He jotted a note. Dog distressed, not attacking. He leaned back, staring at the ceiling fan, turning lazily above. A child's drawing had now become more truthful than sworn testimony. The town reacts by morning. The headlines were merciless. Officer under investigation after child's shocking testimony. Judge Lawson orders re-examination of evidence. Talk shows debated it. Some hosts called Noah the miracle witness. Others mocked the idea that a toddler could append a legal case. But in Millstone, something deeper shifted. People who once doubted Emily began leaving casseroles at her door, small offerings of apology. At the same time, police officers moved through town with wary eyes. Trust once quiet and assumed had begun to crack. The meeting later that week, Lawson requested a private session with Reynolds in his chambers. No lawyers, no reporters. Just 2 men and the silent hum of a ticking clock. Reynolds stood stiffly. Your Honor, with respect, this feels like harassment. I'm ensuring justice, Lawson replied evenly. Tell me again, how did the body end up downstream if you found it near the dock? Reynolds hesitated. The current moved it. The river was high. Lawson slid a photograph across the desk. Then explain why your boot prints were found on the north bank, not the dock. Reynolds' throat tightened. That's procedural. You commanded the K-9, didn't you? The judge interrupted quietly. You ordered it to attack. Reynolds' composure cracked for the briefest second. The judge saw it a flicker of fear or guilt or both. You don't have to speak now, Lawson said. But the truth will come out. The boy remembers. So does the dog. Reynolds turned and left without a word. Threads converging that evening, Dr. Lila Monroe visited Lawson again. He's regressing a bit, she said, setting her notes down. Nightmares. He wakes saying the dog was scared too. The dog, Lawson repeated. Always the dog. He connects the animal's fear with danger. He's not imagining it. Lawson nodded slowly. Then our next step is clear. We need to see how the dog reacts when Reynolds isn't in control. Leela frowned. You mean? Test him? Yes. Let's see who he thinks the bad man really is. The test the next afternoon. The courthouse parking lot became an unlikely scene. Lila, Emily, Noah, Judge Lawson, and a handler from another precinct stood near a temporary pen where Rex waited. Reynolds was absent on suspension pending inquiry. Noah clutched his bear, but looked curious, not afraid. "Ready, buddy?" Lila asked. He nodded. The replacement handler unclipped Rex's leash. The dog stepped forward, sniffing the air, tail low. Then his eyes found Noah. For a moment, the world held still. Rex walked up to the boy, tail slowly wagging. Noah giggled and patted his head. "See? Dog's good," he said softly. Lawson exchanged a glance with Lila. The animal's calm behavior contradicted Reynolds' claim that the child had triggered aggression that night. But then Rex froze, ears twitching toward the courthouse doors. Detective Reynolds had just arrived, ignoring suspension orders. The dog's reaction was instant, a deep growl rising from his chest. He stepped protectively in front of Noah. The crowd gasped. Reynolds stopped, face draining of color. "Call him off." He barked at the substitute handler. "No command given," the handler said quietly. "He's reacting on instinct." Lawson took a slow breath. "That'll be all we need." Reynolds turned away under the weight of dozens of eyes and one child's unwavering stare. Nightfall that night. Millstone was quiet again, but the quiet no longer felt peaceful. It was the hush before confession. Judge Lawson sat alone in his study, the child's drawing pinned to the wall beside the evidence photos. Two stick figures, one smiling, one angry, and the dog between them. He realized the case was no longer about guilt alone. It was about courage, about who would break the silence first. The truth had found its first voice in a child who didn't understand corruption or consequence, only right and wrong. And as the clock struck midnight, Lawson whispered to the empty room, "Tomorrow, the storm begins for real." The morning light crept over Millstone like a slow confession, glinting off the courthouse windows and the river that ran behind it, the same river that had swallowed too many secrets. Inside, Judge Lawson's office was already alive with the rustle of papers and the hum of unease. The footage, the drawings, the dog's reaction, everything pointed toward one man. But suspicion wasn't justice. Not yet. Lawson leaned forward, staring at the photos spread across his desk. "There's something missing," he thought. Something deliberately missing. Joseph Merrow entered quietly, carrying 2 folders and a cup of black coffee. "You're not going to like this, sir," he said. IT recovered another corrupted segment from the body cam. "But it's odd." Lawson motioned him to play it. The glitch on screen. Rain flickered across the lens like static. Then came the low growl of the K9 unit, faint voices, and, for a split second, a reflection in a car mirror. A second man's outline, distinct from Reynolds. "Freeze it," Lawson ordered. Joseph zoomed in. The reflection showed a tall figure with a flashlight, not wearing a uniform. "Who is that?" Lawson murmured. "No idea." The timestamps just before the confrontation. Lawson's eyes narrowed. That means someone else was there before Carter died. He exhaled sharply. The implications twisted his stomach. Either Reynolds wasn't alone, or someone arrived earlier and tampered with the scene. "Get me every officer on duty that night," Lawson said. "And anyone who had access to that footage afterward. Emily learns the truth." Meanwhile, Emily sat in Rachel's office, watching her son play with a toy truck on the floor. She had barely slept since the hearing. Rachel placed a legal pad in front of her. The judge's clerk called this morning. There's evidence suggesting another person was on the scene. Not just Officer Reynolds. Emily's eyes widened. Another officer? Possibly. Or a civilian. Rachel hesitated. It could mean your husband's death wasn't a straightforward confrontation. It could have been a setup or an accident covered up. Emily felt her stomach twist. You mean they might have let him drown? Rachel's expression softened. I mean, they might have helped him disappear before calling it in. Emily's trembling hands tightened around her coffee cup. Noah said the dog cried, she whispered. Maybe. Maybe it saw what they did. The garage that afternoon, a call came from the local police precinct. Officer Helen Navarro, the K-9 unit's former caretaker, had requested to meet privately. Lawson agreed immediately. They met in an old maintenance garage behind the precinct, a place away from cameras and questions. The air smelled of motor oil and dust. Helen, a grizzled woman in her 50s, closed the door behind her. Judge, you didn't hear this from me, she said, voice low. After the incident, Reynolds ordered me to wipe Rex's behavioral log. Lawson frowned. Behavioral log? Every K-9 wears a vest with a body sensor. Tracks vitals, GPS, response patterns. It's standard. But his log from that night? Gone. Reynolds said it was faulty data. But I'd seen the download. It showed something strange before he erased it. What kind of strange? The dog's heart rate spiked twice. First at 10:18, the time Carter shouted. Then again 10 minutes later, when Reynolds reported the body found. Lawson felt his pulse quicken. Which means? There were two events, Helen said grimly. 2 moments of violence. The river again by dusk. Rain began to fall again. Soft at first, then steady, drumming against the courthouse roof like a warning. Lawson stood by the window, looking toward the river beyond the trees. It was the same river that had carried Carter's body downstream. But something about its path didn't fit the report. The official diagram claimed the current moved east, but according to local maps, the bend near Dockside curved west. The body shouldn't have drifted that far. He called Joseph back in. We need the crime scene photos again, the ones from the north bank. As Joseph laid them out, Lawson traced the footprints with a pen. They were deep, boots, heavy tread, a man's weight. But something else caught his eye. Next to one of Reynolds' boot prints was a smaller one, smooth-soled, likely from a dress shoe. Who else was there? Lawson whispered. Joseph leaned closer. That tread matches Captain Hughes' shoes. Lawson's eyes hardened. The man overseeing Reynolds' investigation? Exactly. A long silence filled the room. Then Lawson said quietly, We're not just dealing with one guilty man. We're dealing with an entire wall of silence. The confrontation, the next morning, Judge Lawson summoned Captain Hughes for a private hearing. No press, no jury, just words balanced on a knife's edge. Hughes arrived looking confident, almost smug. You called me in, Judge? Yes, Lawson said evenly. To discuss the integrity of your investigation. Hughes' smile faded. My integrity? I've reviewed photos showing your presence at the crime scene before backup arrived. You never reported that in your statement. Hughes' eyes flickered. You're mistaken. Lawson slid the photo across the desk, the one with the reflection of 2 figures by the car. That's you. And Reynolds. Explain it. For a moment, Hughes said nothing. Then he sighed and leaned back. You're digging into things you don't understand, Your Honor. Sometimes. Accidents happen, and it's better they stay buried. Lawson's jaw tightened. You're suggesting obstruction. I'm suggesting survival, Hughes replied, his voice low and dangerous. Reynolds was following orders. The department wanted Carter quiet. He was going to expose something ugly. Internal corruption, maybe. But he resisted arrest. Things went bad. I told Reynolds to clean it up. Lawson's pulse pounded in his ears. So you covered up a man's death, a father's death, and left his wife to rot under suspicion. Hughes leaned forward, eyes cold. And you'll do the same if you know it's good for you. The recording what Hughes didn't realize was that Joseph had been recording from the next room. The entire confession captured, time-stamped, and sealed. When the captain left, Lawson motioned Joseph in. Back up that audio. Triple copies. One to the DA, one to the state attorney, and one to me. Joseph nodded. You think they'll retaliate? I think we've just become targets, Lawson replied grimly. Emily's visit later that night, Emily was escorted into the judge's office. Her eyes looked hollow but determined. Lawson rose to greet her. Mrs. Carter, I wanted you to hear this before the news does. We've uncovered evidence proving your husband didn't provoke the officer. The body cam and the behavioral logs suggest something far darker. Emily's voice trembled. So it wasn't an accident? He shook his head. No, it was covered up, possibly ordered. Her tears came silent this time, not from grief, but relief. Thank you, she whispered. For believing him. For believing my son. Lawson's eyes softened. He believed first. We just followed his truth. The leak. Within 48 hours, someone leaked the recording to the press. The story exploded across the nation. Police captain implicated in cover-up of civilian death. Toddler's testimony leads to corruption probe. Reynolds and Hughes were both suspended pending criminal charges. The state attorney announced a full internal audit of the Millstone Police Department. Crowds gathered outside the courthouse, holding signs that read Justice for Carter and Truth has no age. Inside, Emily sat quietly in the hallway, holding Noah close as reporters shouted questions. She ignored them all. Her son hummed softly, watching the courthouse doors like they were waiting for someone he trusted to walk through. Rex's farewell, when the hearings finally concluded that evening. Rex, the police dog, was retired from service. Emily and Noah were invited to see him one last time before he was transferred to a rehabilitation shelter. In the small fenced yard, Noah ran to him without hesitation. The dog wagged his tail, licking the boy's cheek. Dog not mad anymore? Noah said softly. Emily smiled through tears. No, sweetheart. He's free now. The handler nodded respectfully. The judge's orders, the dog won't serve again. But he'll be cared for. Noah hugged Rex tightly. Thank you, he whispered. For the first time in weeks, the air around them felt lighter, as if the truth had finally loosened the town's grip. Nightfall in Millstone that night. Judge Lawson stood by the courthouse window again, watching reporters' lights fade down the main street. The scandal had broken open, but it was only the beginning. He poured a drink, his reflection ghosted in the glass. One truth revealed, he murmured, 100 still buried. The river outside glimmered under the moonlight, carrying the past away in silence. But somewhere, deep inside, Lawson knew this wasn't over. Because corruption, once unearthed, didn't die quietly. It fought back. And Millstone hadn't seen its final reckoning yet. The days following the leak turned Millstone into a boiling kettle. Reporters crowded every courthouse step. Camera flashes lit up the town's gray skies, and whispers followed Judge Lawson wherever he went. He had always believed truth would bring peace, but what it brought instead was chaos. Anonymous letters began arriving at his home. Some were praise, others venom. You've ruined careers, one said. You'll regret this, said another. He didn't tell his daughter, who was away at college. He simply tore the letters in half and burned them in his fireplace, pretending the flames could consume the fear rising in his chest. Emily Carter, meanwhile, had become the face of the scandal. The local paper called her the widow who woke the system. TV vans parked across from her mother's house day and night. Every time she opened the curtains, a camera lens stared back. She hated it, but she endured it for one reason. Her husband's name was finally cleared. Yet peace was still far away. Some nights she thought she saw cars idling too long on her street. Once, She found her mailbox smashed open. When she called the police, they took hours to arrive. Trusting them again felt impossible. Rachel advised her to keep a low profile. "These things don't die down quickly," she said over the phone. "The people who lost power because of your case, they'll find a way to hit back." Emily nodded, but said nothing. Her focus was on Noah, who had stopped having nightmares but still woke crying for his father sometimes. She held him tighter each night, whispering that the bad men were gone, though deep inside, she wasn't sure they were. Judge Lawson faced his own storm at the courthouse. The state attorney's office demanded full cooperation, and that meant handing over every file, every note, every recording related to the Carter case. He knew what that meant. They were looking for mistakes, something to discredit him. By noon, the walls of his office were stripped bare. Boxes of evidence lined the floor, labeled and sealed. Joseph helped him pack. "You think they'll try to silence you?" Joseph asked quietly. Lawson gave a tired smile. "They'll try to outlast me. That's how institutions fight, slowly." The first sign of retaliation came subtly. One of Lawson's old friends, a journalist who'd been covering the case sympathetically, was suddenly reassigned. The paper's editor claimed it was a routine rotation. A week later, the courthouse servers went offline for 6 hours. IT reported a network malfunction. Joseph discovered it wasn't a malfunction, it was a purge. Files tied to Captain Hughes' disciplinary record vanished from the archives. Lawson's heart sank. The corruption ran deeper than even he'd feared. He decided to go straight to the state attorney in person. When he arrived in the city, the reception was cold. The attorney, a sharp-suited man named Coleman, listened politely as Lawson explained the evidence. Then he leaned back and said, "Judge, we appreciate your diligence. But the public pressure is immense. We can't proceed until internal review clears the authenticity of your recordings." "You have the confession on tape," Lawson said, his voice low. "You have the body cam data, the logs, the witnesses. What else do you need?" Coleman folded his hands. "Stability. This town's on fire. The governor wants calm, not headlines. Sometimes justice has to wait for the right moment." Lawson stood. "And sometimes waiting is how injustice survives." He left before Coleman could answer. Back in Millstone, Emily received a call that made her blood run cold. The voice was rough, distorted by a cheap disguise device. "You should have kept quiet," it said. "Accidents happen, even to mothers." Then the line went dead. She dropped the phone, hands shaking. She called Rachel immediately, who insisted on alerting the judge. Within the hour, Lawson sent 2 deputies to guard her home. But when they arrived, she couldn't meet their eyes. The uniforms made her skin crawl. That night, rain poured harder than it had in weeks. Thunder rolled across the valley. Emily sat awake by the window, Noah asleep in her lap, staring at the red and blue lights flashing faintly through the curtains. She thought of her husband's voice, soft and tired, the night before he died. "If anything ever happens, Emmy, promise me you'll protect him." She whispered back to the dark, "I'm trying." At the courthouse, Lawson worked late again. Joseph had gone home, and the corridors were empty except for the echo of rain against glass. He was reviewing the original photos one last time when he noticed something small he had missed before. A badge number on the reflection, beside Hughes in the car mirror. Not Reynolds as someone else's. The number was half obscured, but the first 2 digits matched an officer named Darren Tate, a young patrolman who had since transferred to another county. Lawson jotted it down. The circle of secrecy widened. The next day, he called Tate's precinct. They said Tate had resigned 2 weeks after the Carter incident, citing personal trauma. When asked for his forwarding address, they refused to share it. Lawson knew what that meant. Someone had buried him, too. He found Rachel at the courthouse later that afternoon, briefing Emily on new hearings. When he told them about Tate, Rachel's eyes darkened. If there's another witness, we have to find him before they do. Emily's heart hammered. You think they'll hurt him? If he knows the truth, Lawson said. He's already in danger. They spent the evening combing through old employment records until they found a clue. Tate's last paycheck had been mailed to a PO box in Pine Hollow, a rural town 40 miles away. Lawson made the decision on impulse. I'll go there tomorrow. Rachel tried to dissuade him, warning that he was already under scrutiny, but his mind was set. If the system won't move, he said, then we will. The drive to Pine Hollow was long and lonely. A ribbon of wet asphalt, cutting through woods still glistening from the night's rain. Lawson arrived at dawn, the fog low and pale over the fields. He found the post office, a squat brick building with peeling paint. The clerk, a woman in her 60s, looked up from her desk as he entered. You looking for someone? He slid a photo of Darren Tate across the counter. He used to live here. Any chance you've seen him? Her gaze flickered with recognition, then hesitation. He comes by once a week for mail. Quiet boy. Keeps to himself. Rents a cabin near the ridge. Lawson thanked her, got directions, and headed up the narrow dirt road. The cabin was small, tucked behind pines, its porch light still on, though it was daylight. He knocked once. No answer. He tried again. The door creaked open slightly. Inside, the air smelled of dust and solitude. Papers were scattered across a table, unpaid bills, unopened letters, and a small wooden box. On top of the box was a photo. Tate standing beside Reynolds and Hughes, all smiling in uniform. Lawson opened the box and froze. Inside were 2 USB drives labeled dockside footage and personal copy. His hands trembled. Tate had kept the evidence. A sound from behind made him turn. Tate stood in the doorway, pale, gaunt, eyes hollow from sleeplessness. I thought they'd send someone to kill me, he said quietly. Lawson raised his hand slightly. I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here to help you. Tate's voice broke. I didn't mean for any of it. Hughes told us Carter was dangerous, said he'd taken something from evidence. Reynolds went too far. I tried to stop him. He hit me. When Carter fell in the water, Hughes said no one would believe us. He made us delete the feeds. I couldn't sleep since. So I kept copies. Just in case. Lawson stepped closer. That copy might save lives. Can I take it? Tate hesitated, then nodded slowly. If I give you this, they'll come for me. They already will, Lawson said gently. But if we do nothing, they'll keep killing truth. Tate handed over one of the drives, his hand trembling. The other's my insurance. Hidden somewhere safe. Lawson pocketed it, meeting his eyes. Then we protect each other. As he left the cabin, thunder grumbled again in the distance, echoing through the valley like the heartbeat of the coming storm. He drove back toward Millstone, the evidence heavy in his coat pocket, knowing this was no longer about one dead man or one corrupt captain. It was about a system that had chosen silence over justice. That night, Emily received a text from an unknown number. It was just one sentence. He found it. She didn't know who sent it, but somehow she knew it meant Lawson. She smiled faintly for the first time in days. Maybe, just maybe, the truth had finally found its voice. But as she turned off the light, she didn't see the dark figure standing across the street, watching her window through the rain. And when Judge Lawson reached the courthouse the next morning, the front doors were chained shut, a single paper taped to the glass. Stay silent or drown like he did. The war for truth had only just begun. The rain hadn't stopped for 3 days, and millstones seemed to sink under the weight of it. Streets glistened like wet glass, and the courthouse, sealed with its warning sign, stood silent under the storm. Judge Lawson hadn't slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that paper taped to the doors, stay silent or drown like he did. The handwriting was jagged, almost carved into the page, like someone had pressed hard enough to bleed through. He sat at his kitchen table, the USB drive from Tate lying in front of him. It was small, unremarkable, yet it held the weight of everything proof that had already cost lives. Joseph sat across from him, bleary-eyed but determined. "You can't keep it here," Joseph said. "They'll come for it. They already know you met Tate." Lawson rubbed his forehead. "I'll send it to the state office anonymously. But I need to see what's on it first. I need to know the full truth." Joseph hesitated. "You sure you want to?" The judge didn't answer. He slid the drive into his laptop, and the screen flickered to life. Folders appeared, timestamps, video segments, sensor logs. He clicked on the first video. The footage began with heavy rain and flashlight glare. Reynolds' voice barked orders. Then, suddenly, Chaos Carter shouting, the dog barking, Hughes yelling something muffled by thunder. And then a splash. But what came next froze both men. Another voice. Calm, unfamiliar. "Get rid of him." "We'll say he resisted." Lawson turned to Joseph slowly. "That's not Hughes or Reynolds." Joseph frowned, listening again. "Who the hell is that?" The voice came once more, clearer this time. "No witnesses." "You know what to do." Lawson paused the video, his heart pounding. There was someone above them. Someone giving orders. He opened the next file. This one was a police station log entry. It listed a digital transfer to a private email address. The recipient was labeled Coleman S. Joseph swore under his breath. Coleman? The state attorney? Lawson felt the air leave his lungs. Coleman, the man who told him to stay quiet, had been part of it all along. The man responsible for overseeing justice had orchestrated the cover-up from the top. He closed the laptop. "We're sitting on a bomb," he said quietly. "If we expose this, they'll burn everything to stop us." Before they could decide what to do, the phone rang. Lawson answered, expecting Rachel or Emily, but the line was dead silent. Then came a faint click, followed by breathing. He waited. Then a distorted voice whispered, "You took something that doesn't belong to you." Lawson's hand tightened on the receiver. "Who is this?" "Return it," the voice said, "or your little widow won't make it to sunrise." The line went dead. Lawson was already moving, grabbing his coat. Joseph stood. "Where are you going?" "To Emily," Lawson said. "They're threatening her now." By the time he reached her street, night had fallen. The storm raged harder than ever, wind howling through the trees. He saw the patrol car outside her house empty. The front door was slightly open. He ran. Inside, the living room lights flickered. Emily stood in the corner, holding Noah tightly, her face pale with terror. The two deputies assigned to protect her lay unconscious near the door, zip ties cutting into their wrists. "Judge Lawson," she gasped. "They came. 2 men. They said they'd take Noah if I didn't tell them where you were." He scanned the room. "Did they hurt you?" She shook her head. "They were looking for something. One of them kept saying, 'He has it. The judge has it.'" Lawson's pulse pounded. They knew about the drive. He locked the door behind them and drew the curtains. "We can't stay here. Pack a bag, quickly. Where will we go?" she asked, clutching Noah closer. "Somewhere safe," he said. "Somewhere they won't look." 10 minutes later, they were driving through back roads, rain slashing the windshield. The child slept in Emily's arms, exhausted from crying. Lawson's hands gripped the steering wheel so tight they ached. "They're desperate," he said. "That means the evidence is real." Emily turned to him. "Then we finish it. Whatever it takes." He nodded, but in his mind, he saw Tate's hollow eyes, his trembling hands when he'd handed over the drive. If they were coming after Emily now, Tate was next. He pulled over and called Rachel. When she answered, her voice was strained. "Judge, where are you?" "On the highway near Ridgeway. Emily's with me." "It's bad, Rachel. They attacked her house." There was a pause. "I just got a message from Darren Tate. He's gone. His cabin's on fire." The words hit him like a fist. "Is he alive?" "No one's seen him. Fire department found the place empty." Lawson stared into the rain. "Then they're wiping the trail clean." Rachel's voice dropped. "You have to get out of town, Judge. Tonight. They'll come for you next." He looked at Emily, who was rocking Noah gently in the passenger seat. "I can't," he said. "Not until I make sure his father's name stays clear." He ended the call. The road ahead was long and dark, the kind of darkness that swallowed sound. After an hour, they reached an abandoned church on the edge of the county, a stone relic half forgotten by the town. He parked behind it and led them inside. The air smelled of dust and rain. "This will do for now," he said. Emily set Noah down on a pew. "Do you really think we'll be safe here?" He looked around at the cracked stained glass and the leaking roof. "No," he admitted. "But it's the only place they won't expect." He opened his briefcase and pulled out the laptop again. "I'm sending this file to every journalist and federal contact I have. If they kill us, the truth still gets out." Emily placed a hand on his arm. "They'll know the moment you send it." "I'm counting on that," he said. He plugged in the drive and began encrypting copies. Outside, thunder rolled again. He could feel the weight of the storm pressing closer. Every click of the keyboard felt like defiance. Halfway through the upload, the lights flickered. Emily looked up. What was that? Lawson froze. The generator hum outside had stopped. Then came footsteps on wet gravel. He slammed the laptop shut. "They found us." He motioned for Emily to take Noah and hide behind the pulpit. The front door creaked open. A beam of light swept across the pews. Two figures stepped inside, rain dripping from their coats. One held a gun. Lawson stood slowly, his voice steady. "If you're here for me, I won't run." The taller of the two men spoke. "You made this harder than it needed to be, Judge. Hand over the drive." "It's already gone," Lawson said. "Sent to the press. You can kill me, but it's too late." The man took a step forward. "You think anyone will believe a dead judge?" From behind the pulpit came a sharp sound, Noah crying softly. The gunman's light swung toward it. Emily stepped out, shielding her son. "Don't you touch him." She screamed. The distraction was enough. Lawson lunged forward, slamming into the man with the gun. The weapon clattered across the floor. The second intruder rushed toward them, but Emily grabbed a fallen candle holder and struck him hard in the side. He stumbled, cursing. Lawson wrestled with the first man, both slipping on the wet floor. The man's knee hit his chest, knocking the air out of him. But Lawson grabbed his arm and twisted until a sharp crack echoed through the church. The gun slid toward Emily's feet. She kicked it away. Then headlights cut through the rain outside. Sirens wailed in the distance. The two attackers looked at each other, panic flashing in their eyes. They ran, disappearing into the storm before the police arrived. When the officers burst in minutes later, Emily stood shaking, clutching Noah. Lawson was on his knees, breath ragged. The senior officer looked around, confused. "Judge Lawson? What in God's name happened here?" He handed him the laptop. "Evidence," he said simply. Everything you need is on it. Don't let it disappear. They were taken to safety that night under federal protection. The video, by then, had already gone viral. The recording of Coleman's orders spread like wildfire, igniting outrage across the country. Investigations were launched overnight. As dawn broke, Emily sat by the window of the safe house, holding Noah close. He stirred and mumbled in his sleep, "Dog safe now." She smiled faintly. "Yes, baby. The dog's safe." Across the room, Lawson sat watching the first light seep through the blinds. The storm outside had finally ended, but another one had begun this time, not of rain or thunder, but of truth. He closed his eyes, whispering to himself, "Let it burn clean." The morning sun rose over Millstone for the first time in weeks, breaking through the clouds like a promise. The fight wasn't over, but for the first time, justice had a heartbeat, and it refused to be silenced. Morning came quietly, without the thunder and rage that had marked the days before. For the first time in weeks, sunlight poured through the windows of the federal safe house, pale and clean. Judge Lawson stood before it, his face drawn but calmer than he had been in a long while. The night had changed everything. The video had spread faster than he could have imagined, shared, copied, and reposted across every corner of the country. There was no silencing it now. The words, "No witnesses. You know what to do," had already become the headline that shook the nation. The news channels ran non-stop coverage. Every station replayed the same clips of Coleman, the state attorney, being escorted out of his office in handcuffs. Commentators spoke in grave tones, calling it one of the biggest betrayals of public trust in modern history. Coleman's allies scrambled to deny involvement, but the evidence was undeniable. Recordings, transfers, emails, it was all laid out. The system that had always hidden behind procedure and silence was cracking wide open. Lawson watched in silence, his coffee untouched. Emily sat beside him, Noah asleep in her arms. She looked at the television screen, her eyes full of quiet disbelief. "It's really happening," she whispered. "They're actually doing something." He nodded, still cautious. "They'll fight back. People like Coleman always have someone above them. This is just the start." Rachel entered the room, holding a stack of papers and her laptop. "They've issued warrants for half the department," she said. "And get this, Reynolds tried to flee the state. They caught him at the border." Lawson frowned. "And Hughes?" "Still missing," Rachel replied. "But the feds think he's hiding with help. They've frozen his accounts." The judge leaned back, exhaustion seeping into his bones. "Good. Let him run. The truth is faster." Rachel gave him a small smile. "You sound like the man I clerked for again." He chuckled softly. "I'm not sure who that man is anymore." Emily looked over at him. "He's the one who didn't let my husband die for nothing." The room went quiet. Outside, the street was guarded by federal vehicles, agents stationed at every corner. The sense of security was new, fragile. Lawson wondered how long it would last. By evening, the news had reached the White House. A special task force was announced, promising a full investigation into corruption across multiple state offices. Protesters gathered in front of courthouses demanding reform. For the first time, Millstone was a name people knew not for scandal, but for awakening something in the country that had been sleeping too long. But even as the tide turned, the shadows moved too. Later that night, Lawson received an encrypted email from an unknown address. The message was short. "You exposed one branch. The roots are deeper than you think." He stared at it for a long time. There was no sender, no traceable path. Only those chilling words. He closed the laptop, the unease returning. The next day, he met with federal investigators at a secured office. The lead agent, a composed woman named Agent Kendra Shaw, greeted him with a firm handshake. "Judge Lawson, your bravery has sparked something much bigger than Millstone. But it also means you've made powerful enemies. We'll keep you and Ms. Carter under protection." Lawson nodded. "I don't want protection. I want prosecution." Shaw smiled faintly. "You'll get both." They spent hours reviewing testimony, timestamps, and financial records. Every new discovery pointed to a network contracts funneled through shell companies, bribery payments disguised as donations, case outcomes manipulated in favor of contributors. Coleman wasn't the mastermind. He was just a gatekeeper. When they left the building that evening, Rachel turned to him. "You realize this could go all the way to the state capitol?" "I'm counting on it," he said. "If it stops with Coleman, nothing changes." Meanwhile, Emily tried to rebuild some kind of routine for Noah. The little boy seemed to sense the tension around him, but remained surprisingly calm. One afternoon, he sat on the floor with a small toy police dog an agent had given him. He lined it up beside his toy cars and said softly, "He's not bad anymore. He's helping now." Emily smiled faintly. "Yes, baby. He's helping." But later that night, she overheard Lawson speaking quietly on the phone in the next room. His voice was low, serious. "If the evidence goes public, there will be names no one expects. Politicians, judges. You're sure about the chain?" A pause. "Then we go to Washington." When he hung up, she stepped into the doorway. "You're leaving, aren't you?" He looked at her, guilt flickering across his face. "Not leaving. Just finishing what we started. If this goes higher, I need to be there to testify." "You think they'll let you make it that far?" "I have to try," he said. The next morning, federal vehicles escorted them to the airport. Reporters gathered at the gate, shouting questions. Cameras flashed as Lawson walked through the terminal, his name already circulating as a symbol of courage and danger. Emily and Noah stayed behind under protection. She watched him go, her heart tight with fear and pride. In Washington, Lawson faced committee rooms filled with cameras and questions. He sat before senators and delivered testimony that would reshape the state's justice system. Every word he spoke was broadcast live, about falsified reports, intimidation, the deaths covered up as accidents. He told them about Tate, about the note, about a child's innocent words that had cracked open a conspiracy. When he finished, there was silence. Then one senator leaned forward. "Judge Lawson, after everything that's happened, do you still believe in justice?" He looked up slowly. "I believe in truth," he said. "Justice is just the name we give it when people finally listen." The hearing lasted hours. By the end of the day, the Senate voted unanimously to expand the investigation nationwide. It was victory, but not without cost. As Lawson left the building, a black SUV passed too close, and a bullet cracked against the side of a lamppost near him. Agents pulled him inside instantly, shielding him. The car sped away before anyone could see its plates. That night, he called Emily. "They tried to silence me again," he said quietly. Her voice trembled. "Then you know you're close." He smiled faintly. "Despite everything, I think we are." Outside his hotel window, Washington shimmered under the streetlights. Rain had started to fall again, thin and steady. He looked out at it, wondering if storms ever really ended, or if they just changed shape. He thought of Noah, of that little boy's voice pointing at the dog, breaking a silence grown too heavy. He thought of Carter, of the man who'd tried to do the right thing and died for it. And he thought of all the others people who'd been crushed beneath a system that pretended to serve them. He whispered to the glass, "You didn't die for nothing, Carter. We're almost there." In the distance, thunder rumbled faintly, like an echo of everything that had come before. But this time, it didn't sound like a warning. It sounded like change. Lawson turned off the lights and sat in the dark, listening. Somewhere deep inside, he knew the final reckoning was still to come. And when it did, he would be ready to face it. The city was quiet the night before the final hearing. Judge Lawson sat alone in his hotel room, the city lights stretching across the horizon like a blanket of gold. It had been 6 months since that morning in Millstone, the day the little boy's words had shattered the silence. In that time, the country had changed. Investigations had spread across multiple states. Dozens of officials had resigned or been arrested. The justice system, once a fortress of untouchable authority, now stood trembling before the people it had long ignored. But with the truth came danger. 3 witnesses tied to the Millstone case had vanished without a trace. Anonymous threats had arrived daily, some mailed, some whispered through calls that never showed a number. Even within the walls of Washington, there were those who wanted the case buried for good. Lawson turned off the television, its endless coverage of hearings filling the room with static. On the nightstand lay a single folded letter, Emily's handwriting neat and steady. She had sent it 2 days earlier. "Noah starts school next week," it read. "He keeps saying he'll tell his teacher about his dad and the brave judge who saved him. Be safe, come home soon." He folded it back carefully and slipped it into his pocket. He didn't know if he'd get the chance to go home again. At dawn, he walked toward the Capitol, the sky still heavy with mist. The corridors were lined with guards and reporters. Inside the main chamber, seats filled quickly politicians, journalists, and families of the fallen. Cameras turned toward the witness table where Lawson sat, calm but pale. Across from him sat the special prosecutor appointed to lead the final phase of the inquiry, a sharp-eyed woman named Miriam Vega. "Judge Lawson," she began, "today's hearing marks the end of the Millstone investigation's first chapter. Before we move forward, we ask that you read your closing statement into the record." He nodded, unfolding a sheet of paper. His voice was low but steady as it filled the hall. "For years, I believed justice was a system and institution guarded by laws and procedures. But I was wrong. Justice is not found in books or buildings. It's found in people and those who dare to speak when silence is easier, and those who risk everything to protect the truth." He paused, his eyes sweeping the room. Officer Carter tried to tell the truth. Darren Tate tried to expose it. They both paid the price for our silence. Today, I stand not just for them, but for every person who ever believed the law would protect them and learned it would not. We owe them more than apologies. We owe them change. The room was silent for a long time. When he finished, the audience rose to its feet in quiet applause. Vega's expression softened slightly as she said, "Thank you, Judge Lawson. Your courage will not be forgotten." But even as the hearing adjourned, he felt unease gnawing at him. Something was wrong. As he stepped outside into the marble hall, his phone buzzed with a message from Rachel. "Don't go back to the hotel. They're coming for you." He froze. The corridors suddenly felt narrower, the guard's eyes sharper. He turned toward the exit, but a group of suited men blocked his path. One of them, tall and cold-eyed, spoke quietly. "Judge Lawson, you've said enough." He recognized the face agent Moreland, supposedly from the task force. But his badge was missing. Lawson took a step back. "You're not federal." Moreland smiled faintly. "No, we're cleanup." The hall echoed with the sound of footsteps as he backed away, searching for another exit. Just then, Rachel appeared at the far end, waving him toward her. "This way," she shouted. He ran, heart pounding, as the men drew their weapons. A shot rang out, shattering a marble pillar. Screams filled the hall. They burst through a side door and into the service corridor. Rachel led him down the stairs toward the underground garage. They've compromised the detail, she said breathlessly. We have to get to the press building. If we can get you live on air, they can't touch you. He nodded, adrenaline flooding his body. They sprinted through the dimly lit garage toward her car. Behind them, more footsteps echoed. Bullets sparked against concrete. Lawson ducked behind a pillar, firing a warning shot with the small revolver an agent had slipped him weeks earlier. Go, Rachel shouted. I'll hold them off. He hesitated. I'm not leaving you. She shoved the car keys into his hand. You have to finish this. Get the truth out, Judge. Don't let them bury it. He met her eyes for a moment, then ran. Tires screeched as he sped out of the garage, glass shattering behind him. He could still see her figure in the rearview mirror, standing defiantly with her gun raised. By the time he reached the broadcasting building, police cars had surrounded it. He jumped out and flashed his ID. Judge Lawson. An officer recognized him. Sir, we saw the footage. Are you hurt? No, he said, breathless. But they'll be here soon. I need a live feed now. Within minutes, a news station was broadcasting his voice across the country. Standing before the camera, rain soaking his coat, Lawson spoke directly to the nation. The corruption uncovered in Millstone was never local. It was a symptom of something larger, a system built to protect power, not people. I release now the final documents linking the case to federal funding misuse and judicial bribery across multiple states. He placed a flash drive on the podium. This is not about me. It's about every person who trusted justice and found betrayal instead. Today, we end that silence. As he finished, loud sirens blared outside. Through the studio window, he saw black SUVs pulling up, but this time they weren't alone. Dozens of news vans and federal agents were there too. The ambush had failed. The whole world was watching. Within hours, arrests rippled through the system. The conspirators who had tried to silence him were exposed on live television. Coleman, Reynolds, and others pleaded for deals that would not come. Even Moreland, the fake agent, was caught trying to flee the Capitol. When it was over, Lawson finally allowed himself to breathe. Exhaustion hit him like a wave. Reporters swarmed, but he said nothing more. The truth no longer needed his words. It had its own voice now. Days later, he returned to Millstone. The courthouse stood boarded up, awaiting renovation. Emily met him outside, Noah clutching her hand. When the boy saw him, he ran forward, arms wide. Judge, he shouted. Lawson bent down, smiling as he lifted the child into his arms. Hey there, buddy. You've gotten taller. Noah giggled. Mom says you stopped the bad guys. He glanced at Emily, who smiled softly. We all did, she said. They walked to the park where Carter's memorial now stood, a simple stone engraved with the words, "He spoke the truth when others wouldn't." Flowers surrounded its base. The town had changed. People greeted Lawson with nods and quiet respect. The fear that once hung in the air had been replaced by something else, hope. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Emily turned to him. So, what will you do now? He looked at the courthouse in the distance, its roof gleaming under the fading light. Maybe rebuild, he said, but not as a judge. As someone who listens. She nodded. That sounds right. Noah tugged at his sleeve. Can the dog come too? Lawson laughed softly. Yeah, kid. The dog comes too. For the first time in what felt like forever, he felt the storm lift from his chest. The air smelled of rain, but also of renewal. He looked up at the sky, clear, vast, endless, and realized that justice was never about punishment or revenge. It was about truth surviving the storm. And for the first time, it had. He closed his eyes as the wind swept through the park, carrying away the last echoes of fear. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed not in alarm, but in promise. The town of Millstone had been scarred, but not broken. Its people had found their voices again. And as the night settled over the quiet streets, the story of the judge, the child, and the truth that refused to die became more than just headlines. It became a lesson whispered in classrooms, written in newspapers, and remembered in the hearts of everyone who had once been afraid to speak. Because sometimes, justice doesn't begin with power. It begins with a 3-year-old pointing at a dog and saying 2 simple words that made the world stop and listen.